Ko tēnei te mihi mahana ki a koutou. You'll see my title there. So the title was given to us in this session, and I've slightly changed it to Attractive Career Track for an Emerging Indigenous Researcher, ? Because I'm not sure if it's attractive, and I don't know if it's a career track, or if it's even particularly successful. But so this is very much about me and my personal journey, and how I got to be where I am today, and why, and what things have influenced me. So, ko auraki te mauka, ko waitaki te awa, ko kaitahu whānui rātou, ko te ati awa, ko ngāti tama ka iwi, ko hui rapa rawa, ko tamatia ka whare tīpuna, ko parata rātou, ko taiaroa, ko irihana ka whānau, ko Emma Wyeth tōku ikua, no karitani aho. So that's just a brief introduction about me, and you'll find out what that all means throughout because it's all about me. I'm Emma, and I'm currently based in the Ngaitahu Māori Health Research Unit, which is in the Department of Preventive and Social Medicine at the Dunedin School of Medicine at the University of Otago. And I've recently been appointed a lecturer in Hauora Māori there, and these photos. But I have worked in the department for the last 6 years as well. So this is kind of what I've done. As I said, and I'm also really aware that actually my experiences and reasons for doing things I have done are not necessarily new to any of you in this room. But Rachel said, just talk about what you've done. I was like, oh, okay. So I agree with her. So this is about where I'm from. So I live, I'll just move this over so I can see, get this mouse going. So I currently live in Dunedin. This is the South Island of New Zealand, which hopefully you'll all know about. And as touched on in my mihi or introduction, my primary tribe is Kaitahu Whānui, which occupy the majority of the South Island, except for a tiny little V up the top here. We're, the mana whenua, or people of that land within that region. And I've lived my entire life within our tribal region and been very fortunate to do so. And to put that in perspective, there's about 50% of our registered members, which is about 50,000, live outside of our tribal takiwa. So I spent the first 10 years of my life living in a tiny little place, which isn't even on this map, I don't think, just north of Dunedin, and that's a photo of it in the top right, up there. So it's a very small coastal village called Karitani, and the previous 4 or 5 generations of my family have also lived there. And then when I was about 10, we moved to Christchurch, and images like this will be very familiar to most of you for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. And I ended up living there for 8 years, and then left school when I finished school, returned to university in Dunedin, and have remained there since. And this bottom picture is our recently built, I think in 2000 actually, marae at Karitani. So I've now been in Dunedin for 14 years, and so actually my little period in Christchurch is kind of such a small piece of my life so far. And so my predecessors and ancestors have very much influenced how I got to be where I am today, and these are pictures of some of those. And I think this dovetails nicely into Cheryl's comment about whānau mentoring. So education for a long time, for many generations, has been a really important aspect in our family, and I'm very grateful for that. So in particular, my great-great-grandfather, who's also Kyla's great-great-grandfather, here and in the middle here, was born in the 1830s on a very small little island in Fovo Strait, which is at the very bottom of the South Island and almost in the middle of nowhere, very close to Antarctica. And he was the son of an American whaler and a Ngaitahu woman. And unfortunately, when Tami was very young, his father died, and as was kind of a tradition then, he was sent to what is now known as Karitani and was brought up by his great uncle, which is how we got to be, living there for successive generations. Tami married another, what was then, they were called half-castes, Kaitahu woman, and she's in the inset, just in here, who was also from further south of Karitani, but they married and had 11 children, and they farmed in the region just above, up on the hill above Karitani. And Tami was very instrumental in Ngaitahu history and all sorts of other things, but he was involved in building the local Anglican church, the native hall, which is where our marae now stands, and the local school, and he also became the Southern Māori Member of Parliament, and was then one of 4 Māori seats in the late 1800s, and he was recognised as a leader from very early on, and it was requested of him by Sir George Grey to go to schooling in Auckland, and he was very passionate about his people and didn't want to leave home, and probably Auckland was a big scary place back then, but chose to stay in our community and focused on efforts there for our people. And once he was in Parliament, he was involved quite heavily in things that are relevant to what we're talking about today, but in kind of Māori health reform, sanitation, public health policies at the end of the 18th and beginning of 19th century, including one of his sons was also heavily involved in that too. And within his community, he, embraced new knowledge and technology, and so he took it upon himself to employ a European farmer and to teach him how to plough the land, and he recognised that others had skills that were necessary to help those in our community. So once Tami had learned how to do this, he took it on himself to teach those in the district, and then encouraged everybody to put in money and purchase communal farm equipment and things that would further develop those that were, struggling at that time but trying to make a living on the land. And further down the bottom of the slide you've got, so I come off one of the daughters of here, who of one of Tami and Petey's daughters, and Kyla comes off another daughter. This is my great-grandmother here, and she also married another Ngaitahu man who was from the other side of the harbour and has links to Taranaki, which is how we whakapapa in there. And again, they were instrumental in the community, involved in developing the community shop and the farming co-op that was already up and running. And particularly relevant to my now teaching, Paul Johnny was involved with one of his daughters during at least one of the flu outbreaks, epidemics, that they would go around personally visiting each of the houses and providing healthcare or anything that these families wanted while they were in a kind of time of isolation. So you can see here that, and I think this photo in the bottom here demonstrates nicely kind of the two cultures that our family have had for many generations. So you've got my grandmother and her 2 sisters and auntie here, doing some kind of welcome at the marae, or the hall as it was then, wearing their European refinery and high heels and dresses, and I think it's depicts well that juxtaposition that is the reality of many of our own families, but particularly for Ngaitahu, where intermarriage happened from such an early stage. So I come from many ancestors who were lawyers, politicians, in the military, and were very involved in state initiatives. And these days, they probably wouldn't have been thought to be very trendy Māoris, and that they engaged with the state. But the key figures within our family recognised and thought that was how we would benefit, and it was our kind of almost right to, take advantage of these systems and work within them. So from a young age, I kind of education was important. It was kind of a natural maybe thing that I would progress through school and onto some form of tertiary education, and I've always had a keen interest in science-related things and health. So that's kind of where I get to be where I am today. So these are a bit out of order actually. So one of the probably best things that happened to me returning to Dunedin and going to university was that I met my now husband, so in the bottom left, and he's also Ngai Tahu, and we now have 2 children. There's only one in this photo and another one on the way, but very similar and different upbringing. So from a tiny coastal fishing village at the bottom of the South Island, and he describes their family more of working class, and we're not into classes, or but I think it provides our kids with a very unique historic background. So on one side we've got ancestors that had dinner with the Queen on more than one occasion, and then we've got others that have struggled on the land and struggled in the labour force and things like that. So it's really important for us to instill all of those values in our kids and make sure that they are very aware of who they come from. And one of Mike's family's greatest assets, I'll call it, is that they are very staunch mutton birders. And I don't know if New Zealanders should know about mutton birding, but I don't know if many of you others know about it, but I'm not going to go into it today, but it's a traditional food gathering practice that only some Ngai Tahu have whakapapa rights to be able to do that. So Mike's family have done this for generations and generations, and they're one of the very few families nowadays who still pack a lot of their birds in the traditional vessels, which you can see here our son is preparing with his great-grandfather, so Mike's grandfather there, and this is the 3 of them on the island a few years ago, and Kura's right into it now. He's an expert. So this is more about us. And so you can see here our daughter as well, and I think Mike and I mean, we like this photo because it was a great day, but it's also it mirrors those images back in the mid-1920s and 30s of where we're wearing our Sunday best, but we're on the marae and we've got feather cloaks and all sorts of other things happening. So that was our wedding day in Bluff, where Mike's from. And what else was I going to say about this? Yeah, I think that's all I'll say about that. And yeah, these are just our kids, but I think place is really important to us. So this photo here is our kids having a picnic, but not just any old picnic. So they're on a piece of land that we own that is down south near Bluff and has been in Mike's family for 3 generations. And right across the road is where Mike's great-great-grandfather was born. So we've got really intimate links with the land and the place, despite not necessarily living, right on the back doorstep. And so I came to Dunedin and I went to this place called the University of Otago, which also links into my Scottish ancestors on my mum's side. And so I don't know how much you know about Dunedin, but it was built by Presbyterian Scots, essentially, including the university. And we've got these pretty amazing buildings there. And for me, I haven't always necessarily seen that my two backgrounds are completely different. Like, we've got very similar values of hard working, education being important, lifelong learning. The Scots built the first high school for women, I think, I don't know if it was in the Southern Hemisphere, but in Dunedin, which my mum then worked at, and so they're very much intertwined. And as I said earlier, I've always had a science-orientated mind and a keen interest in health, and particularly Māori health. So I kind of, had this maybe natural progression to come to university, but actually it wasn't that well planned. And once I got there, I was like, what am I going to do? So I did, as over 1,000 other students do every year, do first year health sciences, which is our pre-med year. And then looking back now, fortunately I got into everything except for medicine. And I think if I had gone into medicine, I would have gone down that track. And I think just because it would have saved me making some real decisions. And but that made me, at the end of my first year, made me stop and think about what it was I actually wanted to do and where I wanted to be. So at the time, genetics was a new degree at Otago, and so I embarked on an undergraduate degree in genetics, and then again, and enjoyed it, and it was quite a broad-based degree, and at the end was thinking, well, what am I going to do now? Do I really want to go and work? And Mike at the time was also finishing his undergrad, but he was he had another year to go, so I was like, oh, what's this thing called a PhD? I suppose I might investigate that. So despite knowing about education and the system, it was, I wouldn't say it was planned at all, but it was kind of by default that I ended up then doing a PhD because I had to wait around for my husband to finish. So embarked on a PhD, and it was very focused on Māori medical genetics, and the lovely Kyla there was one of my co-supervisors, and I thought one of the conversations was interesting this morning is that if we're using the word mentor, then I would call her a mentor, and she was my official co-supervisor. So some people were saying that that they're not necessarily the same things. I was very fortunate to be able to have Kyla's skills and expertise officially recognised in that journey. So I'm being told I have to speed up. So this is, you've seen half of that photo. I cut Justine out because I hopefully for the right reasons. She lost a whole lot of weight, and I didn't think she would appreciate a photo that was 5 years old. But and down the bottom is a photo of this tiki that my husband had made for me. But I think it again depicts the kind of two cultures, probably more cultures, that we currently live in. So, a tiki is very much a traditional Māori image that portrays a whole lot of things, but good health, good luck, fertility things. And in its hands are a DNA double helix, which is, represents my genetics journey. And then we might just brush over this, we won't tell Mike. But so Mike also embarked on his PhD, and Rachel said, talk about how you're both academics. I was like, oh, well, that's pretty boring. But we are both academics, and we now both are lecturers. And I think that, for us that's just is how it is, but we've both been very fortunate in that there is a certain kind of lifestyle that academia does offer. I don't think it's all bad. And we've made a choice that works for us, and it works for us with young kids. Fortunately, we're in quite different disciplines, so it's quite good to keep some things separate. So I'm just going to kind of rush over this, but so I then embarked on a postdoc, and again, I'm really grateful to the HRC for funding this, and some people probably think it's the never-ending postdoc, but it's now finished, and I had babies along the way, and I also then reduced my time on the projects and things. But for me, that was really where my, career developed. So I kind of changed tack a little bit, still stayed in the field of Hauora Māori, but was in public health. And that was how I thought that I could contribute more to Māori health outcomes. But I do think that my genetics experience and knowledge has also contributed greatly to my current work and understanding of the basic science, if that's what you call it. But part of reducing my FTE was that I did a stint for 18 months working for Te Rūranga o Ngaitahu, which is our iwi corporate entity, and did this crazy thing of applying for the job the day I got home from the hospital with our daughter, and then wondering what on earth I was doing, but got offered the job, and it was a new position, so it was program leader and research development, and it was a great opportunity, and I had some really, really amazing and unique experiences, but as many of us will know, working within our, a corporate structure that is our own, that is part of, it's been established because we all whakapapa to this common ancestor, has its tensions. And my position wasn't actually funded by the iwi, so they weren't putting any money into it. It was funded by one of the government agencies as a kind of pilot, and it was, fixed term, and so was my postdoc was coming to an end, and I was like, oh, I'll do this, and kind of broaden my horizons. But it has helped with my current job. So towards the end of last year, a tenured position came up, and back in the department that I had been working on, and I had to make the choice, really. Did I want to work for, continue working for my own, or go back to the university? And I think that there's a whole lot of things that academia can offer. So I've talked about the lifestyle, the flexibility, and actually the freedom of having that thinking space. And I think you become, all our iwi are so overcommitted, and Māori academics are also in a very similar position, but I think there's very little time for research, and very hard as the sole, research and development leader without a budget, without actually my position even being funded. So while it looks great on paper that, we had this amazing position, but what it did do is that when my position came up was that it did force Ngāi Tahu into realising the value of the position, and they offered me, sorry, I'm all here, I said on stage. They offered me a full-time permanent position, and then I thought, oh God. So anyway, I decided to leave, and thought that I can still contribute greatly from within my current position. So these are some of the things that I did on my postdoc, and they have all helped get me to where I am and in my current position. And then, oops, last slide. So sorry, this is a bit rushed, but so I don't, as I said at the start, I don't know if it's a good example of a career track or a successful one, or what was the other, attractive one, but it's kind of worked, and we've kind of juggled things, and there's been, it hasn't been easy. As Kyla said, I wasn't going to touch on any of that today because we just sometimes choose to block it out, but again, this photo just depicts the, in our weekends, which are very busy, we have these other responsibilities to our, cultural responsibilities, family responsibilities, and this was us collecting kelp for the most recent mutton birding season, and amongst all sorts of other things. But kind of our answer to it is just to kind of take our kids along for the ride, as lots of others are also doing here, and show them that things can be done, and that it's not a choice. It's not a matter of choosing between the two, really. And so our kids, are growing up with going to university every day, and so it's just a normal part of their lives, which is kind of our answer to hopefully breeding success. But we'll see.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to acknowledge country and also our elders past and present. My background, I'm actually a public health physician and a GP. So I virtually do more clinic work than what I do research. I probably do 3 days a week clinic and 2 days a week research. And when I do double in research, it's health service research about, how we can best do things in primary health care. So sort of building up the evidence about what works in primary health care and how we can improve health outcomes for Aboriginal people. This is probably just the same for Canada and New Zealand. The biggest problem we have about getting, young Aboriginal people into research is about, primary school education. I think, our government has not only let down Aboriginal people in health, but also education. And this is about retention rates for our Aboriginal students in grade 8 to grade 10. And we're certainly making big inroads. If you look there in 2011, we're nearly up to non-Indigenous. The gap's really narrowed. But the problem to me is the next one, the grade 12. Still a huge difference in retention rates at school. And the kids that do finish grade 12 are less likely to do science subjects, which are really vital, especially in health research. So, they're the big barriers that I see. So we need to improve, our primary education system in Australia for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids. I took liberty about defining what this topic meant, just like the other two. I was talking to the other two speakers, and they said, what are we supposed to talk about? So, to me, a pathway to research in Australia is really many and varied. For example, in this room, Chelsea Bond, who works with me and also at the university, or did work with me and now with the university, background as a health worker, Aboriginal health worker. Went back to uni, did her Bachelor of Applied Science in Indigenous Primary Health Care, then a PhD, and her PhD was one of the top in the University of Queensland and received an award. And now an emerging young Aboriginal researcher, and I think that's got a very, very bright future. And as the past speaker said to you, you have to talk a bit about yourself. Me, I've got pretty varied background. I went to grade 10 and then left grade 10 and I was going to be a surveyor. And I did that for a year, didn't like it that much, so I went back and did grade 12. And then I worked in, then I did a Bachelor of Applied Science in Food Technology. So I worked in the food industry for, probably 5, 6 years. And then I saw an article in the paper about there's been no Aboriginal doctor that's graduated from the University of Queensland. So because I had a past science degree, I applied. And in retrospect now, I know that I did actually an intelligence, one of those scores where they see how smart you are and can you handle it and blah, blah, blah. When at that stage, they all come from high school and none of them had to do that sort of testing. But moving on, so after I worked in the food industry and then I started medicine, I was sort of older than all my registrars and consultants at that stage. So I finished medicine when I was 37, and I'm thinking about what will I do? How can I best benefit my people? And then I thought about public health, looking at populations, and that gave me the tools to actually do some research. And some of my earlier research is about improving Indigenous access to mainstream health services. It was very problematic in Australia. Aboriginal people don't access mainstream health services for a wide and varied reasons. So having said that, I do work at a government centre, and when I started this community health centre, only 12 Aboriginal people accessed the centre. Now we have over 6,000, and I've just finished building a centre of excellence in Indigenous primary health care, which before, I don't know if you know about Queensland politics, but Emma Wyeth, who's not there now, we have a new Liberal government, but she gave me $7 million before she left to actually build a new centre and $2 million recurrent funding. So I'll talk a bit about the focus about that centre because it very much involves research. So going through, what I saw was, we seem to have fairly good support for undergraduate study. Okay, every university seems to have a Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander study unit and they get tutoring and so forth. But when it came to postgraduate studies, it's very limited. And someone mentioned this morning about Indigenous mentors. We just don't have, many quality Indigenous mentors to mentor our young researchers. When I sort of started to do study, we had no mentors. My role models were actually footballers. There was no academics when I started to do study. And I'll talk about Charles Perkins, who was the first Aboriginal male to get a degree in Australia, and that was back in 1966. When I was a young teenager. But now we have these centres that have been established at universities. The Poach centres, Poach is a rich family, philanthropic, that's actually donated quite a bit of money to improve Indigenous health. And there's Poach centres now at University of New South Wales, the Flinders University and also at Alice Springs. And then the Charlie Perkins Centre. And also up in Queensland at the Queensland University of Technology, we have an Indigenous researcher network and recently funded, I think, $3.6 million to actually look at hooking up researchers across Australia. So with these poach centres, their main aim is to sort of undertake research that informs service delivery, deliver practical health care to Indigenous communities, reduce a range of preventable illnesses and give Indigenous people a decent health and reasonable life expectancy. Not too much to ask. And as I say, these centres probably been, I don't know, probably be about 4 years. Have been, I think Alice Springs has been in more recent times. And then we have the Charlie Perkins, as I said, was an Aboriginal guy. First guy to get, as I said, a degree, University of Sydney, back in 1966. He was awarded an Order of Australia, and our National Trust of Australia declared him a national treasure. And he had an honorary doctorate from the University of Sydney in 2000. And Charlie, to me, was a visionary. As I said, I was a young teenager then, and I can remember these freedom rides where he'd be jumping on a bus and going to Aboriginal communities in New South Wales, Walgett and Kempsey spring to mind. And he was advocating, for the disparities between Aboriginal health, education and housing. And he'd go to these communities and show the appalling conditions that Aboriginal people lived in. And so it doesn't surprise me that the University of Sydney wants to carry on his legacy. So what they're doing is they've set up this Charlie Perkins Centre. And again, their aims are to collaborate and forge innovative research partnerships, develop research programs, translate, which is a really important concept, of knowledge into practice, and also work with communities, government and private sectors. But the big thing is that last one: inspire, train and mentor the next generation of researchers and practitioners. So, that's what we're all about today, about that last line. And also our Australian Research Council. In 2012, they had some special funding research initiatives, and one was actually to develop, a national collaborative network for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research. And Professor Morton Robinson, who actually I went to school with, and I gave a talk at one of her network meetings a few years ago, and the first time I'd seen her for years, and still look good looking as ever, I told her. So that was good. And also QUT, they want to sort of partner with Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies and other universities and lift the profile of Indigenous academics. So the core function of this network is to build Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research capacity, mentor new researchers, advance research in Indigenous knowledge systems, and connect researchers across disciplines nationally. Someone was talking this morning about, I think it was New Zealand, about getting all the disciplines together to look at problems. And another initiative from the NHMRC was about Discovery Indigenous Researchers Development Scheme. And the objectives was that are very similar, about supporting Indigenous researchers and trying to attract and establish more Indigenous researchers into the industry, so to speak. Now this one's close to my heart. I work at Inala, and as I said, I work at a community health centre, and with that Centre of Excellence, I actually wrote an article in MJA in 2009 about improving Indigenous access to a mainstream health service, and in that article it said that our vision was to create a Centre of Excellence in Indigenous primary health care, and it would be linked to universities for teaching and for research. And in our centre we have medical students for their GP rotations, we have medical students on their electives. We also have Indigenous medical students that come through our centre too. And also linked to colleges. As I said, I'm College of Physicians and the College of General Practice, so we link with them and try and train their GP registrars. And part of my vision was also to actually go to communities where access is poor for Aboriginal people. And I started going out to Cunnamulla. I don't know if people know where Cunnamulla is, but it's out west, and it's probably about 9 to 12 hour drive. High population of Aboriginal people there. And I started going out there on what an MSOAP program, Medical Specialist Outreach, and it's ICD, Indigenous Chronic Disease. And with that program we're allowed to take, a GP, a specialist, a team actually. we take 2 nurses, an admin, and on occasions I take a cardiologist, and other times I take a cardiologist and an endocrinologist, and I go there as the GP. And we've been doing that for 3 years, and when I first started we used to be about 20, 30 people in the 2 days. Now we see over 100. And the thing is, what we're trying to do is evaluate that. So, as I said, evaluating what actually happens in the clinic and how to improve that. And with most MSATE programs, all specialists got to do is just count the numbers and how many people they see, but is that really improving health for Aboriginal people? Where we actually analyse all the data, and we know that we've been doing well. For example, for our diabetic patients out at Cunnamulla, when I first went out there, HbA1c average about 9.7, and last time we did an analysis just recently, average is down to 8. So we actually know we're improving health outcomes, and people are coming to the service. So that's where I'm very much into health services research, about what works in primary health care and how we can build up the evidence about what we can do and improve outcomes for our people. So with our Centre of Excellence, it's about the community, and we've set up a community jury that looks at all our research, and Chelsea runs our community jury. And if you want to know more about it, I'm sure Chelsea will let you know, because she's actually doing an evaluation of our community jury at the moment. So the community jury is actually consists of elders, young and old, male equal female. And it's amazing to me, I've gone and because I had to present to the jury some of my research, how much thought they actually put into the proposals that we present to them, and the excellent feedback they actually give back for lay people. It's just amazing. Some very valuable feedback. And with this centre, as I said, the main focus was about teaching and improving the capacity of local people and how we do that best for research. And I think in a Centre of Excellence you can provide a really good culture about research. We've only had funding since 2012. We've had over 30 peer review publications in our little centre, 56 conference presentations. We've had 6 nationally big competitive research grants. We've got one person who's actually a non-Indigenous person, but he's one of our doctors. I'm probably too generous to my doctors. I give them a half a day off a week to do research. So I don't have to be in clinic. Some takes a bit more advantage of that than others. But I think if you build up that type of working environment, people work extremely good, and they you can see their passion about improving Aboriginal health. We have 2 novice research fellowships that we've won, and the other thing we're doing, we're involved in Carnini vascular collaboration. It's about cardiovascular disease, and we're a research site, and what we do is we employ a local Indigenous research officer that links community and the research project. And these people not necessarily have to have great academic qualifications, but what we want to do is give them a positive experience in research. And from that, we've had one guy that has done that project, and now he's doing his masters. So trying to give them a flavour about research, I think, is really, really important. So I want to stick to my 15 minutes. So in summary, you can see the problems about poor retention rates at high school. And I only spoke about a couple. Look, but in Australia there's many and varied ways to become a researcher. I don't think you come to grade 7 or whatever and say, I'm going to be a researcher. I think you get a bit of taste of it once most graduate degrees usually have a project in it, and that's where I found my first taste of research, is doing my masters for my MPH, project within that. So, I said, this is great fun. I did a community health profile of one of the communities in Brisbane, and they used that document for years, to provide them information to get funding and so forth. So, as I was saying before, I think we've got fairly good support for undergraduate, but limited for postgraduate. We need more Indigenous mentors. But what I see is we've got these great big centres established within universities, and being a member of council on NHMRC, still see very few Aboriginal people putting in for grants. You know, it might be early careers grants, it might be, you know, there's actually fellowships for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health research, but there's only about 1 or 2 Aboriginal people, all the rest are non-Indigenous, and they're the ones that usually get the grants. So it's you know, we've got to turn this around. And what I also see is I've probably you know, been doing work off and on for the NHMRC for over 10 years or more, and I used to be on the review panels, and I can tell you who's going to get a grant just by looking at their name. Okay, so that, you know, a proposal will come in, I'll see the name, so I bet you that person will get it, because these people, you know, these CIs build up great. You look at their track record and you go, bloody hell. And Aboriginal people just got no chance of actually, you know, competing with that. So what we need to do, and, you know, I don't know whether NHMRC can say, well, to those people, say, well, why don't you take an Aboriginal researcher on some of your projects to try and, you know, get them as CIs so they can actually build up their profile too, and then be able to put in as a CIA to actually get their own grants. But at the moment, we're going nowhere. We really need to change that around. And so, you know, as I said, as being a member of council, this is what I want to do, is change that around. And I think this is a good forum to discuss how we can do that in our different countries, about how we can get more Aboriginal people applying for research grants on their own as CIAs. That's what I want to see. Thank you.
Well, I think I'm one of the only ones that doesn't have a PowerPoint presentation, so you have to unfortunately look at me the whole time. Sorry for you. So I just want to say Tansi Tanshikia, hello, and Miigwech, thank you for inviting me here to Murrumbidgee County and asking me to speak. And I want to thank my ancestors and my grandfathers and grandmothers for being with me today. It's quite an honor to be here among so many incredible scholars. I was quite shocked when I was asked to come. And when I read the list of speakers and attendees, I was nervous, but I was also jumping around like a little girl. And my 14-year-old daughter was quite making fun of me. She said I was like a groupie or something, you know. She's like, I was getting all my books out and trying to decide which ones I should bring so I can get autographs. And then I realized I was probably going to make my bag too heavy, but because I don't know how to pack light at all. But she said, well, you know, it's like her wanting, you know, a One Direction, you know, autograph. That's how I was acting, she said. So I was laughing pretty hard at that. But it's how I felt, because so many people in this room, whether you realize it or not, are my mentors and my role models. I've been a faculty member now for going on 13 years, and did my PhD while I was a faculty member, which was difficult. But it was even more difficult, I think, going to those grad classes and having professors look at you and saying, you know, you could take a grad class and you think, oh, this is supposed to have Indigenous content. You get excited, and then the professor turns to you and says, oh, Carrie, why don't you know, talk to us about that? And so having those role models and those mentors along the way, even if you didn't know it, just by something you wrote or something you said at a conference, that helped me to get through some of those tough times was really integral and really important. So thank you, Miigwech. So I was asked to speak about this definition of attractive career tracks, and I really didn't have any clue. Jacques and I talked quite a bit, and I said, I'm really not sure what I'm supposed to say. But I reflected on my life, and I reflected on my experience in helping other students and people helping me. So I have a few things to say, and we'll see where it goes. I wish I could tell you that medicine, nursing, epidemiology, and public health are the career tracks of choice. But in Canada, what we're seeing is, unfortunately, that's not the case. And those are the gaps. That's where we want to steer our students. But the attractive sort of career tracks that many people are taking are the social sciences, you know, education, interdisciplinary, maybe community health if we're lucky. Social work is another big one. And I'm not saying those aren't necessary, especially coming from me, who's a social scientist. But it's just that we need that complement on the other end. And a few of you spoke about that this morning. I know Dr. Benoit spoke about that, where you need to merge that science with that social science, and it's so important. And we're really struggling with that in Canada, and I'm not sure if it's the same in other countries, in Australia and New Zealand, but it's certainly the case in Canada. And I think that's certainly an issue. And I don't want to step on my colleague, Dr. Lee Wilson's toes too much, because I know he's going to talk about gaps, but I know that's certainly definitely a challenge when we're talking about mentorship and when we're talking about the lack of mentors. And so I think it's important to think about that and think about when we're looking, you know, I have more questions than I do answers in this presentation, so that's something to think about in terms of, you know, how we match mentors, right? You know, I don't know if it's by discipline is the answer. I think that conversation we had before lunch is important. I think that more and more interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary teams are important, and maybe that's how we look at things, but certainly trying to recruit students into science is an issue. And it's not a matter of ability or intellect, it's a matter of self-esteem. And it was the same for me. I wanted to go into medicine, but I didn't have the confidence, and I didn't have the support at home. I grew up in a home where my grandpa had grade 3, and he was my primary caregiver, and my mom and dad had grade 7 and 8. I was the first to graduate high school. I was the first to go to university, and I'm not saying this to make myself feel good, because the only reason I did is my grandpa kicked my butt, you know, to go, you know, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. It was my earliest memory, childhood memory with my grandfather. Now, I didn't even know what a lawyer was, but he would make me repeat it, right, over and over and over in my head, because that's all he knew that would break that cycle in my family. And so I never ever wanted to disappoint him. And I lost my grandfather when I was 19, so I never did go into medicine, but I hope he's happy that I'm a doctor of some kind anyways today. I always think he'll be happy with that. But it's that I think that, you know, we're talking about the remnants of colonization this morning, and Dawn, you put it so well that there's this pressure, I think, on our generation that we need to go above and beyond and be all things to all people. And I think that's certainly how I felt, that if I couldn't do it 100%, then I wasn't going to do it. And also growing up in a fairly dysfunctional home, I had to be really good at what I did, and what I was really good at, I didn't have to study for. But with math and science, I struggled, and I didn't have any mentorship in that. And I think, you know, that's reflective of why we still are seeing some of these, you know, low graduation rates, and students that still have fear of math and science. We're still having students coming into First Nations University, and in our health program, which is a very interdisciplinary health program with a high concentration in Indigenous health stream, they freak out when they even see they have to take biology and a stats class. You know, and we have a stream specifically to get them into medicine. They can get into any kind of medicine except ophthalmology, but any other kind of medicine, and it's very difficult to get them into that stream. They don't think they can do it. We have to give them all kinds of support, and it's mostly because we have to get them to believe in themselves, believe that they can do it. And that's just undergrad, and we're not even at postgraduate studies yet. And I think, you know, Dr. Wilson and I were talking earlier that that's really what we have to think about when we're talking about mentorship is that early, right? That we have to get those undergraduates to believe and get into that stream so that then they will go on to graduate studies. And it does become that important, because without that mentorship that early on, they're not going to go on, we're not going to attract them, and then we're not going to have those mentors that we're dying for right now. We also continue to see, and we certainly see this not only at First Nations University, we see this at our NEAR Centre, our Network Environments for Aboriginal Health Research, where I'm the nominated principal investigator. Our NEAR is called the Indigenous Peoples Health Research Centre. And we see mature students, mostly, a lot of single mothers. And so the support and mentoring for them is is much different than it is for other students. And again, I don't know if this is a similar issue in other places, but it's something that we need to consider in this mentorship program as well. And also, how do we recruit more men? I want to see more men in the health field. I want to see more men in graduate studies. And that's another thing we need to think about. And they're going to need a different kind of mentorship than single moms do. And we're finally starting to see some students right out of high school. And again, they need different kind of mentorship. So being a mentor, it's not so different than having to wear those different kind of hats. I see myself as a wife and mother first, and then and a community member, and then you're an academic, and then I'm a goalie mom, and you're all these different things, right? You wear all these different hats, and it's the same with a mentor. You have to be able to be a different mentor for different needs, and I think when we're thinking about a mentorship program, we have to consider that, because there's just definitely different needs and definitely diversity if we're going to be successful. So those are some things I was thinking about that I think are definitely important, and something that we have to think about across the spectrum from undergraduate all the way through. And then I had some other thoughts as well that I think we, I always like to go from positive. We are as Indigenous people globally, we are very, very resilient, and if we weren't resilient, we would not be here. And I think that's really important, but I also think we have to live in our reality, and our reality is that colonization has affected us, continues to affect us. And we see that when we look at our students that still struggle with poverty. And when we give out awards from our IPHRC for graduate studies and we say, oh, here's $17,500, now go and live on that. And we expect that they're not, and you can't work, by the way. Sorry, CIHR. Because, the mandate is you get the $17,500, but you can't work with that, and we have to say that to our students, But if you are that single mom with two or three kids, or even one kid, good luck on living on that. I mean, I never ever took a scholarship, and do you know why? Because I had to work full time in order to support my family. Because a scholarship never, ever would have allowed me to support my family. Okay, so I have to wrap up. A few more points though. Self-esteem, as I mentioned, and that's really important because you need that proper mentorship support. That's a remnant of colonization. I think also the varied levels of familial support. I had a family that supported me, even though a lot of times, my dad would say to me, I don't really know what you do. He still has to carry my card around because he doesn't really know what I do, but he's proud of me. But some families don't support their students to go on. And we have to think about that because of the effects of residential school. Those are all remnants of colonization. And then I was thinking about things like cultural and spiritual support. We often don't think about spiritual support, but it's really important. And we do that at First Nations University. May not be able to do that at all places, but we can build that into our mentorship program. And then thinking about systemic issues. Systemic racism obviously still exists. Thinking about balance, somebody mentioned balance this morning. And then the last thing I want to mention before I let you go is we're thinking mostly about academics here, but also community mentorship. I do community-based research. Almost all of us here are engaged in that. And we work in the community. I always tell the community, I want to work myself out of a job, because the goal here is that you don't need me anymore. You don't need academics anymore, that you are the experts and you will have the capacity to do your research. So if we're really true about saying that, or if other people believe that, then we need to walk the talk, and then we should think about that component in a mentorship program. So those are some thoughts and some questions maybe that we can think about. So miigwech, and thank you.